You're listening to Unshaken, the Hope Dealer podcast, where we rise, heal, and make no excuses. I'm your host, Jason Brooks. Let's turn trauma into truth and pain into power. Let's go. What's up, y'all? It's your boy Jason with another episode of Unshaken, the Hope Dealer podcast. I'm back again with my boys from rehab. And in this episode, I'm with my buddy Roberto, and he's going to give us some insight on his journey, what led him to rehab in Florida. It was an awesome time. Well, I shouldn't say an awesome time. It was a healthy time. We basically got our lives back on track. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce my guy, Roberto, and he's going to tell you about his journey. What's up, Roberto?
What's up, man? How you doing, Jay? Doing good, man. Doing good.
Introduce yourself. Tell us a little about yourself. What led you to rehab, and how you doing? And let's roll.
Right, man. Well, like you said, my name's Roberto. My journey started years ago, man. When I was a teenager, I just that's where I picked up my little did I know it was going to be my addiction, right? Started with the party crowd, just drinking, smoking pot, doing the things that what we think kids do, right? But little did I know it was leading me to a bigger spiral in my life later on in my adulthood, and so that went on for many years. Got married, had some kids, still thought drinking was the thing, just kept partying, kept drinking, and what really led me up to my point where I had to get myself into rehab. I let it totally get out of control because I let it be the solution to the circumstances in my life, right? So instead of dealing with things that are hard, having the hard conversations that you need to have with the people that you love, people you respect, instead of doing that, I chose to do what I thought was numbing it, right? When in fact, all it did was intensify the things that I was dealing with, And in doing so, it led to many, many poor choices, One of them, the big one for me, the rock bottom for me was I was at the point in my alcoholism where I was drinking up to about, I would say, a good 2 to 3 pints of liquor a day, just from my 30-minute ride home, from work to home, Yeah. And causing total havoc in my relationship, total havoc with my children. I was the kind of alcoholic who could get pretty drunk, pretty well to the point where I'm not falling down drunk, but I'm very functional. I was a very, very functional alcoholic. I could go to the games, I could coach, I could do all these things, but I was just completely lit, In doing that, I got to the point where one day I came home, I was completely plastered. And at the same time, I was also abusing substances, right? I had prescriptions from doctors for this, that, and the other, right? Hurt shoulders, torn shoulders, hurt knees, whatever the case was, right? So I was drunk. I took some of my medication, and that was it. It was lights out, man. Had I been home alone, I wouldn't be here talking to you guys right now. I would have never met you guys because I would have been dead. My at the time he was 19 years old, I believe, my son. I walked into his room. I was having a conversation with him, and that was it. It was lights out. I flatlined, and he brought me back, man. To wake up, to come back to life, to your son pumping on your chest, waking you up. It was totally just a total wake up call, But you both, let me backtrack a little bit. You would think it would be a wake up call, right? When in fact, I was grateful. I was so grateful that my son was there. He saved my life. That was a rock bottom for me. But guess what I did the next day? I still got drunk. You know what I mean? So, I was basically faced with, an ultimatum with, my wife was like, I can't do this no more. If this is the life you're going to choose, you're going to continue to choose this. And I can't choose you anymore. Right. So it was either you go to rehab or let's get a divorce, you know? And then I didn't want to lose my family, you know what I mean? I love my family, I love my kids, and my kids and I, we have a tight relationship, you know? My daughter was pregnant at the time. We were about to have a grandchild. And like I said, you would think all those circumstances would make a person snap out of it, right? But like I said, I used alcohol and drugs to just check out, man, just to completely check out. And like I said, it started affecting my health because I did see that, you know, I was starting to get these pains in my body that start off with signs and symptoms of probably cirrhosis. I don't know. I never did get checked, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I would imagine I was headed there, you know? And so, you know, I made that call. Like D said, 12 hours later, I was on a plane, still had me a drink before I got to Florida. You know what I mean? That was messed up, but I did, you know?
I think everybody does that before they go to rehab.
I was like, okay, one last hoorah, you know?
Yeah.
And so I got to Florida and started the started the detox, man. That was tough. It was really tough. And I don't think in my whole entire time of being an alcoholic, I was sober for more than gosh, maybe a few weeks at a time.
Yeah.
You know, and and being in Florida, that was the longest I've been sober, completely sober in a very, very long time. It gave me a time there to really reflect, being away from your family, being away from the ones you love. It really plays a game on your mind. I mean, you know, a game with your mind, and it makes you think like, man, this is what my life would be like if I was on my own, you know, and I really used that time in rehab to, you know, reflect on the goodness that God has given me, because I lean a lot on my faith, right? I really do believe that, you know, that there's a Lord, that there's a God, and we're here, we're put on this earth for a purpose, right? And so I leaned into that, I pressed into that, and and I used it as a way to check back into reality, you know, check back into my life, and that's what's worked for me. You know, I did take away a lot of good things from rehab. You know, you were talking about the breathing. That remember you guys remember that box breathing thing? The breathing, the four and four. Man, I use that all the time when I'm starting to feel my blood boil. I'm like, here I go. I'm like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, doing the breathing, you know,
Yeah.
and it
That helps me
works, you know.
with
So
a lot of anxiety too.
yeah, for real, man. And so you know, that was basically my, in a nutshell, my journey to rehab. You know, I definitely, I know I probably hit rock bottom probably several times in my alcoholism, you know what I mean? But my true rock bottom was at this point, you know. And I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but that's kind of what it was, you know. And meeting you guys and being able to have conversations with perfect strangers, you know what I mean? That you open up to them, you're vulnerable with these people, right? And you're sharing things with them that you probably wouldn't share with anybody, you know?
Absolutely. We walk the same path or similar path, so it's easier to talk about it.
Oh yeah, for sure. You can totally connect with that because a lot of people in my family, you know, especially like on my wife's side, none of them, you know, drank or alcoholics. You know, I think her grandma was an alcoholic, but she was already long gone. I grew up in a family of alcoholics, you know what I mean? So how do you talk to another alcoholic about your alcoholism when they're doing the same thing, you know? I mean, my brother, you know, he's been sober as well for, my gosh, almost 10 years now, you know what I mean? And he was a big help for me too, you know what I mean? But like I said, you know, when you meet people like we did, you know, when in meeting each other, you build, I guess, a different kind of trust with these people, right? A different kind of connection that you're able to open up and say, like I said, say things that you can't say to other people, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you one thing. Since you've been home, I'm sure there was that first time where Whether it was you walked into a social situation and there was somebody asked you to have a drink, or you just saw alcohol. When was the first time? Because we've all been tempted. Like there's been times where I've thought about it. That's all it's been as a thought. Tell us about the first time you've had either a temptation or a thought, what you did to make it subside, and just what you do to, curb that, or what helps you.
So I think, in coming back, I don't believe that I had any immediate urges, right, to drink or anything. I was very focused on my recovery. When I came back, I was like I said before, my daughter was pregnant when all this happened, when I first went to rehab. So when I came back, like 3 days later, I was a grandpa, right? I got back home just in time. So, I think that helped a lot. I know that helped a lot, you know what I mean? Because my mind was focused on this brand new blessing, right? We had a brand new baby in the family, and that was my main focus, was to be better for my family, right? To start the chain breaking in that family curse of alcoholism, right? To be able to leave a legacy, to start a legacy for my family, right? Of alcoholism, to break that chain of alcoholism, right? That was a major thing for me. And then, I don't think I really got tempted to have a drink until about maybe 2 or 3 years later. Like you said, you walk into that social setting, you see somebody drinking, you meet up to buddies that are drinking or whatever, right? The thought crosses your mind, but then you got to reel yourself back in and say, hey, man, I just went, I've gone through all this stuff. Do I really want to start that again? You know? And again, in leaning in my faith, you know what I mean? You guys, I'm sure you see my Facebook posts and stuff. I do lean hard into my faith and the stuff that God has really pulled me out of, man. I can't even express fully how much I lean in my faith, you know?
So one last thing, if there's one piece of advice that you could give somebody that's watching this right now, and they're absolutely struggling with alcoholism, or let's say somebody's got an addiction to opiates, for example, and they're watching you, Roberto, what's one piece of advice you could give them to give them a glimmer of light?
Talk to somebody. We all tend to hide in the shadows when it comes to our alcoholism or drug addictions. Like I said, you got to find that person that maybe it's, somebody you trust or whatever, but you got to talk to somebody. You got to open up with somebody. I did that for a long time. Like I said, with my hurts and all the things that I thought were justifying my drinking and my drug use and stuff. I just clammed up, you know what I mean? I clammed up and I didn't open up to anybody at all. I hid it from everybody. Most people didn't even know that I had a drinking problem until I made it very clear. That was one thing I had to do as well. And coming back was make it very clear to everybody that, I had a problem. I have a problem. You know what I mean? We still have a problem. We're still alcoholics. We're still drug addicts. We got to fight it every day, We got to die to that every single day. And that was one thing I made very clear. And the people that I thought were my friends, they took care of themselves. You know what I mean? They scattered like, I don't know what you mean, but like cockroaches. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like the light came on and they scattered, man.
Yep. That's the truth. All right, folks. So that's some great advice. The opposite of addiction is connection. So yeah, reach out to somebody. There's people that love you. But look, thanks for watching this episode. If you enjoyed it, subscribe. But I want to thank our guest, Roberto Baca. He is the man. But thanks for paying attention. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next episode. You're going to see all three of us, and we're going to be spitballing our time in rehab. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Unshaken, the Hope Dealer podcast, where we turn trauma into truth and pain into power. If you've enjoyed this episode, hit subscribe and keep showing up for your healing. Until next time, stay brave, stay bold, and stay unshaken.